Alright, so one of the things that I wanted to do in the new year was a few more of these type videos, which is where I'm going to sit down and really slow things down a bit and try and explain what I'm doing and hopefully teach you guys a few tips and tricks of what goes through my head and how I approach drawing these characters. And so today we're going to start with Kylo Ren from the new Star Wars movie. So as you can see here, we're starting with the rough, but just a little prelim to this. I mean, this is probably going to be a pretty long video. I would, not entirely sure, probably around 20 or 30 minutes long. I really wanted to slow it down as opposed to having it super fast, as they usually are, in the hopes that I can explain a little bit more, and hopefully you guys can pick up a little bit more as well. So, yeah, hopefully you guys dig this. I really want to do a lot more of these this year, so if it's something that, that you're into, then, yeah, for sure let me know down below, and we'll keep it going. Alright, let's get started. Alright, so as you can see, the way that these things start is at this stage here, which is like a rough stage, and you can see I've got like a blue pencil out and I'm really just scribbling everywhere. By now you would have seen like probably 3 or 4 different poses. On the other screen I've got a Google page up where I've just either Pinterest or Google, just Kylo Ren, and just looking for poses and costumes and all this sort of stuff. But you can see, most importantly, how loose the detail is. And then right here I'm like, okay, I'm somewhat happy with the pose, but now what I want to do is I want to do like a second pass over it. And so that's what I do here. I pick a darker shade and sort of drop the opacity on that other layer and then start drawing. Now, one of the things I really want to point out is what's going on here, because even though I'm doing a rough and Kylo Ren wears a mask, so technically you're not going to see his eyes, you're not going to see his ears or anything like that, but you saw that I still drew the facial shape, and I think that's really important when you're sort of trying to lay things out. Even when they got a mask, then you're not going to see ears, you're not going to see eyes, nose, or anything like that. It's important to know where those elements are, and so that's why I sort of put them in a little bit and then sort of erase them out. As I do this, I usually use the soft eraser tool in Manga Studio, and when I erase, it doesn't remove everything, but it just means that I can sort of cut out a little bit here and then sort of lay it over. And you can see that I'm not really paying a lot of attention to detail. I'm just trying to get proportions and posing right. And that hand that I laid in there, I mean, that's the pose that I want. It looks a little weird at the moment with the elbow coming out. You'll see me play around with it a little bit, but I know that that's where I want it to be. And I have to take it, sort of play around with it from there. One of the things that I can do in these videos is also explain like some of the weaknesses that I have and how I sort of combat them. And one of the things I get a little bit cheeky with here is one of the things I think I struggle with mostly is probably at the moment feet and legs and how to sort of position them. So I knew when going in here I really wanted to only have one leg showing, and so I got a bit cheeky there, but also managed to come up with a pretty cool way of adding a little bit of flavor to it. Like with cartoons and the stuff that I do, I always try and have like a little bit of flavor, something a little bit different. And here is with the cloak coming down and sort of, you know, rippled on the ground a little bit. You'll see in the final piece I curl it back rather than have it sort of sitting like that. But it's just adding a little bit of my own thing to it. And the other thing that I do, which some people have noticed as well, is every time I have a hand holding something, it's always pinky out. So if you go and have a look at all the posters on my store, you can see that each one of them is always holding his pinky out. So it's one of those other little funny things that I like to put in all the pieces that I do. I got a few other things to come up with as well. To speak about in terms of weaknesses and strengths and stuff like that, but I'll address that as we work on the line work a little bit more. So you can see that once I was happy with that a little bit more detailed underlay sketch, I start moving on to the line work. Now with Kylo Ren, and with this piece that I'm doing, I really want to keep the head a lot bigger than the body, and it also needs to match the other pieces that I've done, because I've sold these in like almost like a series. So you can see all the sort of chibi like posters that I have, which have been relatively popular at conventions, to keep them looking all the same, because I have a lot of people that purchase obviously multiples. I want to make sure that that all the proportions are the same. So with the Batman piece, or say the Han Solo piece, or anything like that, I always try to say, okay, the head is the same size as this, and try and keep those proportions in there. So that's one of those things that the rough also helps me do. It also helps me make sure, in a very quick sense, that the posing is okay. And so for me, it's usually the head is about the size of the torso or a little bit bigger, and then the legs are a little bit bigger from there as well. And the hands I usually have really big hands coming from sort of relatively small shoulders, but it's all style stuff. What I'll talk about now is a little bit more of the technical side of things in terms of the line work. So there's two main brushes that I use. One for line work, which is called the Yeti Inca, I believe. I've got a link for that down below, and I've added like a slight little slant to it, so you can do the same if you wish. It's pretty easy in the brush settings there for Manga Studio. And the other one that you'll see me use during coloring a lot is a brush. You'll see it in the brush palette called Josh Test. As the name suggests, it started as a test to me mucking around with some settings, and I was really happy with how it came out, and I haven't renamed it since. So I'll put a Dropbox link down below. I'm pretty sure that just started as a painter brush or something, I'm not sure, and then I just adapted it and changed the settings a little bit as well, so hopefully you find some use out of that. The other big pack that I use is the Brian Allen pack. I've got a link below. I think that was a couple of bucks, but it's got splatters and clouds and all amazing things. Fantastic. It's the best money you'll spend for Manga Studio. I definitely recommend picking that up. But yeah, for now, so talking about weakness a little bit more as well, hoods. I can't stand hoods. I've said it before in streams. I can't. I find it really difficult to get the cloth sitting perfectly the way that I like. So yeah, I mean, you can see me here sort of working a little bit. And the other thing is, a lot of people that know my style, I like to give a little bit of 3D dimension to things like cloth and stuff like that. So you see me give it a little bit of an edge. Like the cloak that hangs down, it has that little bit of a square edge to it. It may come a little bit from drawing so much Minecraft, but it's something that I like to try and add in. You see the mask here that I've done. I mean, I really like to include a lot of detail, and I looked at a lot of reference images for hoods and his mask and everything like that. And in the end, you'll see me completely redo the face, and that's right here. I've gone too far. All right, and so when we're cartooning, what we're trying to do is exaggerate and simplify and exaggerate certain elements to create this sort of caricature that obviously people can relate to the original design. And I took it really too far here, where there's just too much detail and it's too cluttered, and it just looks horrible. So you'll see me completely redo it. But I think that mistake was kind of a good thing, because as I saw it, I knew that, and I knew I'll probably go back and redo that a little bit. But what it did is it reminded me that as I go through and do the rest of the torso and the legs and the body, simplify things, and I felt like I really did that. I find like right now, you'll see a lot of the stuff that I do, I rely on color to sell stuff a lot as well. So I'll sort of base in a few things, and then basically just rely on my color work to try and pull it through. So you might see that a little bit here as well. I'll try and point out when those things come up. But here is like the cloak, and this is a little thing adding a little bit of character. And so I wanted to add this little bit of a cloak curl, so it sort of wraps around a little bit. Might be a little bit Tim Burton inspired or something like that. I don't know where it sort of came from, but it's little things like that I'm always looking to try and do. So that and the pinky thing, which you'll see. I won't forget about that. But yeah, so here's the leg, and so leg and feet is something that I've struggled with. I say the most at the moment. See, you can see that he looks way too top heavy here. This leg isn't really working, and so I guess a little curl and stuff like that is probably something that I use as well to try and distract the eye a little bit. Okay, I can sort of put this here, and hopefully if I don't pull the leg off right, pull the leg off sounds a bit weird, but then there's other elements that will sort of draw the eye away a little bit. In the end, I feel like it worked out. I got the legs sort of looking somewhat okay, but I don't know what it is. I think I go through stages. Like I used to be fine with drawing legs and feet and everything like that, but then I would be struggling with hands. And then now that I have hands, sort of, I've got my bag of tricks. Actually, that's the other thing that I was going to say. With strengths and weaknesses, I feel like my hands, I've come to a point where I sort of know where I'm going to go with the hands. You can see that my hands look like sort of they're a little squarey, a little bit biscuity. But as you begin to draw a little bit, you learn. You've got this toolbox. You've got these hand poses that you will rely on. And if you look through a lot of my work, you'll see the similar sort of hand poses, because I'm like, hey, that's my go-to. Like grabbing things, like holding the lightsaber, I'm fine with that, or guns or anything. It is really sort of my go-to, and so I usually try and will push the drawings towards that, and try and include those a little bit. So you'll probably start to see that a little bit more now that I've pointed it out. But here you can see I've got the pinky out. So when I draw my hands, I'm trying to. So basically, they come. I with the forearm, I still have that little bicep curl there, and then when I'm doing the chibi style art, it's more of a four. I do the 3 fingers and the thumb, rather than the 5 or the 4 fingers and the thumb. And I think it just suits the style a little bit better as well. And big chunky hands, usually almost the size of about half the size of the face. I don't know, I feel like it sort of adds to the cuteness a little bit, maybe, I'm not sure. But you can see, so here's where I redo the face, and you can see me go right back to basics with the circle, and I'm laying in the eyes, and I've got my direction line as well. That direction line is so important, so you can know where he's looking, and so I can sort of lay in things correctly, I guess the word is. So have things proportioned properly. These eyes are terrible here, and I'm playing around with this pattern, and then in the end I wanted to go with something a little bit more sinister, so I just dropped the eyebrow to almost like a line, and then threw some more angles on it. And that again comes down to, hey, am I copying the actual character's face design exactly, or am I adding a little bit of style? Am I adding a little bit of Josh, or that little bit of personality to it? And it completely simplified the silver part on the face, ran those lines along the top, and then in the end what happens is that it's Kylo Ren, but it's just not crammed up with all that detail, and I much prefer the way it turned out. Also around the edges, I'm sort of putting in where the edge of the face is going to be, but I also know, and again this is that element of me which is relying on color, which is kind of hard to convey whilst we're working here, but I'm like, okay, well, I know that I can blend those edges out in color, so the edges of his face will disappear in that hood, and I'll just have that silver there. You can see me use the transform tool, so just Control T, and you can use the Control key to just move the anchors around independently, so you can modify things a little bit independently, so you can change the perspective a little bit. So that's another cool little thing as well. So you grab that bottom right corner, and instead of pulling it and transforming it uniformly, you can hit the Control key and sort of skew things out a little bit if you find like the head shape or the eyes is a little bit off. The battle damage also on his mask is really just placeholders for me to remember. I kind of just got to color them in. I think in the end I ended leaving the lines there, but I know that in color I can come to that and sort of paint that in almost. Adding a little bit of detail to the cloak. I guess like at this point I'm zooming out a lot as well to make sure that everything's all working together. The head's not too big, the body's not too big. Everything feels like it works. So now we start heading to color. You can see I've got 2 line work layers at the moment. One of them is the lightsaber lines where the glow is, and then which I'm just putting into a layer here, and then the other one is the rest of it. And then what I did is I selected the outside of the entire piece with the marquee tool, with the magic wand tool, sorry, and then I hit Control Shift I or Command Shift I if you're on a Mac. It inverses the selection, and then I just filled it with Alt Backspace. Which will be something else, backspace, command, option, backspace, or something like that on a Mac. And what that does is it gives me this basis to work from, so then it sort of fills him entirely. Also with that selection, you may want to shrink or expand it a little bit so that it cuts into the lines. It's kind of hard to explain. I might do a separate video on it. But as you do that more often, you'll sort of notice what I mean. And then what I do is I create new layers above that base layer. So that base layer never gets colored on. That's almost just like a block layer. And I create a new layer above it and hit Control Alt G, which then adds it as a clipping mask, essentially. to that layer, and then I approach each bit separately. So you can see the visor I filled in black completely, and then I locked the transparency on that layer. So what that meant, the lock transparency button, by the way, you would have seen me click it, is at the very top of your layer palette. And there'll be 4 little buttons, and there's like a little lighthouse, a lock, and then there's a lock with like that little transparent eye. And if you click on that, wherever you haven't colored, you can't go outside the line. So I color the area that I want to color, I'll block it in. So you see that mask, I blocked it in with one color, and then I lock the transparency. Then I can do things like get my airbrush and pull in some higher colors, and it's not going to go outside the lines. So it's really handy when you're sort of doing these sort of different areas. So here I'm just using the Josh Test brush, famously named, just to hit the edges here and give it a little bit of highlights with certain colors. The harder I push, the more density, more dense the paint will come out. But with the silver here, I've also added a little blue tinge to it because I know the piece is going to be very, very red. And speaking of red, we're going to jump over to the lightsaber now. So you can see the way that I do lightsabers, I fill it with white, then I erase all those lines because I don't want them there anymore, because sometimes I like to erase the lines just because it gives a bit more of a natural effect. Once those lines were erased, underneath that that white that I filled that shape in, essentially the lines were just there to give me that shape, I then take that red airbrush and I just stroke it in behind it ever so softly till it picks up the edges, and what it does is it gives you that white in the center and then like the red glow outside of it. Then I jump back into that white fill that I did, have the layer locked, and I actually filled it with orange because he had a little bit of orange behind him, and then I just took that white airbrush again, used the stronger setting in Manga Studio rather than the soft setting, and just dragged that down to sort of give it a bit more of a white to orange gradient, and then bang into red. It actually came together pretty easily. I thought I would have to spend a bit more time on it. I usually fiddle around with things like that a bit more, but I was pretty happy with how it came out. So here I'm going to apply out the different sections, and by doing them in different sections, I can use that lock transparency layer to sort of, what I'm doing is I'm getting that airbrush and I'm getting that high saturation red, and I'm blasting it in there, and it's not going all over the image. Like, because I have that hood colored in its own section and the transparency locked, I can bring that airbrush in, not worry about it going anywhere else, and get that little bit of a glow effect. And so I'm laying in that red glow there, and then I'm coming in with my shadows. Now with my shadows, I'm using my Yeti standard, Yeti slanted brush. So with my shadows, I'm usually laying them in with a heavy, solid brush. There's no transparency on that brush at all. In fact, it's the same brush that I use to do line work, so it's very, very solid. And then when I do the highlights, so you can see around the edges of that cloak, around the top, where I laid in that heavy red, that is that's done with that Josh test brush, and it's got that little bit of transparency to it, and so as I push more into it, it gets, you know, heavier and heavier around the edges. Obviously, you need a tablet to get that pressure sensitivity, but that's generally how I do it. All my shadows are with that solid brush. Another tip here is I pull out the Navigator, or what Photoshop users would know as a Navigator. It's called the Navigator here as well. Cool. So yeah, I pull it out and make it its own window, and then I drag it out to make it relatively big. And so what that means is when I'm zoomed in, looking at sort of detailed sections like here on the arm, adding in the red glow, I can see how that's working for the entire piece. So I can say, okay, yeah, that's too much red, or it is working. So I can get a sort of visual thumbnail. And seeing your piece zoomed out like that is also really important, because it shows you what's working or what's blending together, or what you may need to change. Obviously, right now it gets a bit tougher to change things now that we're coloring, but I think it's important to see that sort of thumbnail sort of view as well. Just a little bit about the background as well that I didn't mention. You can see I just laid in some blue there. I wasn't too sure what color I wanted to do. I wanted to complement the red, so I was definitely leaning towards more purpley blues and stuff. And so I've laid in something there, but what I use for that is just the cloud brush, which is in that Brian Allen brush pack. It's called Clouds, and it is amazing. All of the pieces that are in this series that you see on the website all use that same sort of cloud brush in the background, and then I usually just add a little extra things depending on the piece. For this one, I think I added like a few little snowdrops. I think the Batman one I did was like some raindrops. The Destiny ones were all a little bit different as well. I think the Han Solo one had similar sort of white star type things in there. So as you can see, I'm doing each section individually, and this one was really, really tough because his entire, I mean, we are literally coloring in black here. The entire piece is done black. His entire outfit is black. And we need to be able to add a certain level of separation. And so that's where the red's really helping, because I can sort of cut in the red as almost like a highlight to separate things, and then I'm using like a lighter grey as well, but I'm keeping all my colours neutral. So that usually with my greys I will slide it across a little bit to the blue to add a little bit of cool colours to it, but here I'm not. I'm keeping everything neutral because I know that the red is going to offset everything. And what I also want is I know that the lightsaber is going to be silver, and I know that his mask is going to be silver, and both those silvers I did pull in the blue. So you'll see in the final image, you have a look at that silver. It's not just a neutral metallic silver, it's got that blue pulled into it, into the shadows and all that, and that really helps to complement the red, I find. So yeah, just laying in the shadow on the boots here. So again, it's all the same process. I block it in, and then I get my airbrush and I just dabble in a little bit of red there so that I can see where it's going to sit, and then I lay my shadows in with my hard Yeti brush, which is, so it's all a thick line. One of the things you can do as well when you have that selection created, you can then, when you drag in it, when you draw in your shadows and you've got that all as a solid edge, you use your magic wand tool to select the section outside of that solid edge, and you can run a gradient right upside along it. And that's what I do a little bit as well to make the edges stand out a bit. And that I really like the effect that happens here. So one of the things that you can see though right now is when we zoom out is there's so much black and red going on. It's really hard to see where parts of his body are, where his arms are, and all that jazz. Here I attempt to paint a little bit of metal. I think if any part of this piece was the weakest, I think it was probably the lightsaber. I don't know, I just didn't put enough detail into it maybe, or I'm not sure. That was the one bit that I wasn't 100% happy with, but in the end it worked okay, so it wasn't too bad. But yeah, so in terms of that separation, so everything looks very, very sort of similar. So now what I do is I go around on the edges where I've done the shadows, and I'll add what I call like a rim highlight. You'll see also just there how I selected those areas which weren't shadowed, and I just ran the airbrush alongside of it as well. So I play around with the background, but to add that separation, this is where that white stroke comes in. You'll see me put that in a second. Right now I'm just playing around with the shadow underneath the foot. But what I generally do is I select that base color that we create, that big solid color of the entire piece, and then I'll expand that selection by like 10 or 15 pixels, and then I'll fill it underneath that layer. What it will do is we'll create a white stroke around the entire outside of the piece, and then I'll go over above the line work layer, and then cut in some more white edges. So you can see that coming in now. I erased it along the bottom, but so now I'm going right above the piece and add in a few little white strokes to cut in. And what that does is it cuts in and adds a little bit of separation. It's another thing that really just comes down to style. I like to add it in to pretty much all the pieces I do. So you can see me run along the boot here, and it just adds that little bit and just makes it pop out a little bit more. So sometimes I'll color it, sometimes it won't be white. Right now there was so much red that I really didn't want to add in any more red. I really liked how the red was sort of glowing off there, so I said, add it just along the edges, and then I'll use the soft eraser to hit the edges where that white stops, so that it sort of fades in a little bit as well. But yeah, that's pretty much it. So I think we're going to be wrapping things up here pretty quickly. So hopefully this video has helped. I'll put a final picture up now. This piece is available, as well as others in the series, over at my website as a poster, A3 poster. So if you're interested in getting your hands there, that's shipped internationally as well. So please do go check that out. And I'll also, what I'm going to do is put up a a link on the store. It's going to be a relatively cheap link, just to, obviously it's there for just obviously the bandwidth and stuff like that, probably $1.99, and it's just going to be the complete 4-hour video file of me drawing this, so in real time. So there won't be any talking over or anything like that as well. I'll put up some examples here on the screen of how slow it is, so you can see it in real time. So if you're interested in that, then please do head over to the website, and you'll probably be able to learn a few more things about how I work there. So that'll be $1.99. I'm going to do that for all of the pieces that I do in this series as well. But yeah, so hopefully me yammering on for a little bit helped you guys, maybe gave you some more understanding, some different tools, stuff like that. Please leave any questions in the comments below, and I'm going to do another piece in this series as well, and I'm going to do another walkthrough like this if you guys like it, and I'll answer any of the questions that you guys have. So yeah, anyway, thanks again guys, and we'll see you in the next one. Alright, bye.